And we are back with more on News Talk Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this edition of the Mark Petronis Show. We're going to be bringing in Andy Lee in a second. She's doing tremendous work. I mean, this is a journalist. This is a lady who has been going through reams of documents. She has made requests for documents, and she's certainly got herself under the skin of the Liberal government, to the point now where we've got Liberal members of Parliament saying, wait, we don't want to name names when it comes to exposing people, possibly embarrassing people. What she's really worried about is embarrassing herself and her government, as more and more people are being exposed into what perhaps is the biggest scandal, certainly the biggest electoral political scandal in the history of Canada. It's already claimed one scalp in the form of Vincent Ke from Ontario, a PC member of provincial parliament who was asked to step away from the party, leave the caucus of Doug Ford. We still don't have a police investigation on that. Still waiting on that. Maybe Andy Lee has some thoughts about that as well. Andy coming to us from beautiful Calgary, Alberta, which of course is in the midst of an election campaign right now. Welcome once again, Andy.
Hi, Mark. It's good to be back. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. Let's talk about somebody who's not that great, though. Let's talk about Anita Vandenbeld. She's a Liberal member of Parliament who, as you pointed out in your tweet, was performing incredible mental gymnastics in a committee to protect her party on foreign election interference claims, stating that these reports shouldn't say what the government knew, how they knew it. In other words, say nothing, say as little as possible. And this is why this whistleblower released these documents to the media, because they knew they were never going to get a fair hearing from these people. But she's saying, maybe it's a little dangerous to put people's identity out there as having been implicated in this massive scandal. Let's listen to Anita Vandenbeld.
Process is perfect? No. And in fact, NCCOP itself has put together a number of recommendations over the years about how these processes can be improved. But the fact is, you have a place where you can ask those questions, where you can get the secret information, where somebody who comes to testify can actually offer what they know, can offer that secret information in an environment where even the opposition is present. And then that
wow, even the opposition is present.
Committee can make reports that are ultimately made public. That committee can make reports that will say, not this is what the government knew and this is how they knew it and this is the person who told them and this is the, because this could put a lot of people in danger. But instead make reports that say,
how so? I wonder.
We've had access to the materials. The government gave us full access or didn't give us full access. The government acted or didn't act on the materials that it was given, and then make that available to the public. And in fact, what that does is it makes it so that you do have the incentives for the government to ensure that they are providing those materials. And this is...
Do you know what the hell she's talking about? Because I don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, so she's talking about, we're talking about doing an independent inquiry and stuff like that. And so, she's really more concerned that there's no finger pointing going on and that this is a nonpartisan process. She doesn't want any names to be given out to the public or anything like that, because she feels like that would be non-incentivizing for our politicians to come forward. Of course, I feel that our politicians should come forward if they have some sort of knowledge as to what went on and, give up that information willingly. I don't think they should have to be incentivized to do that. So basically, she's asking for sort of immunity and amnesty for people to come forward and offer the information up. And so that shouldn't be, released to the general public and things like that in a report. So protecting basically the politicians. Meanwhile, of course, they're desperately searching for the whistleblower. And no doubt if they ever find that whistleblower, that name will be put out for everybody to see, and that person will be publicly shamed. So that's their opinion, is that, if they release details in this report, it could be dangerous to some people. Meanwhile, though, we're hearing from actual Chinese Canadians. We heard from Chuck Kwan from the Democracy Association in Toronto the other day. We've heard from Eileen Calvary before. from Hong Kong Watch about how they've been actually threatened on Canadian soil by what they feel are, members of the Beijing regime, right? The Chinese Communist Party have been calling them, asking them about their parents back in China and things like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, while the Liberals are filibustering, and they've been filibustering now, I think, for about 14 hours, they've been stalling. While they've been doing this, we've been hearing these heart-wrenching stories from Canadian citizens who are actual genuinely at risk. And the longer they put this on, the more that risk drags out for these people. So it's really they're really collateral damage in this whole saga, where the Liberal Party won't just come forward and meet this head on and tackle this. These are the people who are suffering
Okay, talk about this. We've had this tweet up that you put up. Raymond Chan and his wife Ting Ting Wang also donated. At the time, former Liberal MP Raymond Chan was one of the Liberal Party's key fundraisers, targeting wealthy immigrants from mainland China. His wife Ting Ting Wang was a special advisor to Trudeau. Why are these people significant?
Yeah, well, so these are people who were on that list that I put on. I released that list of Papineau donors around the 2014 to
Right.
2016.
Okay, so these are people from Vancouver who are donating to Trudeau's riding in Montreal.
Yeah, I just question, because some people, not a lot of people, but Bob Mackin has been digging into that list. A couple of other people have been. Noah Chartier of the Epoch Times has been digging into it, and I've been looking into it just to see who donated. And so this is interesting that these people who used to work really, really intimately with Justin Trudeau also donated, and they were known for sort of bringing in these wealthy Chinese donors. So I question whether, and of course, this is an unusual, compilation of donations that happened. A lot of them came from British Columbia. A lot of them came from Markham as well, but most of them didn't come from Papineau. They're almost all Chinese donors, and they flooded in right before the election or in and around that time. Some of them were linked to the Wealth One Bank that just got nailed by FinTrack. They got charged for, under FinTrack for not reporting large transactions, which could be linked to money laundering. They got a $700,000 charge by FinTrack. So really lots of stuff going on. But I just found that Raymond Chan, because, they worked so intimately with Justin Trudeau, I have to question whether he was maybe behind or orchestrating some of these, these really, really wealthy Chinese businessmen that came and poured donations into Justin Trudeau's Papineau riding, and whether maybe him and his wife had a hand in bringing those donations. And again, it's not illegal. What happened here, I'm not saying that what happened here is illegal, but because this is somewhat of an anomaly, and I think that most people who look at this list, it's hard to say that it wasn't an anomaly.
It's just a little odd. So, for instance, as you mentioned, Bob Mackin tweeted this and did some research on it. Cash flew from West Coast donors to Trudeau's Montreal riding in 2015 and 2016. Many of the donations to Trudeau's and other Liberal Party candidates' campaigns came from individuals connected to the Chinese Communist Party. And it's taken, 8 years or 7 years rather, for this stuff to come to light. But now that it is, I guess the Liberals are kind of running for cover, as we just saw from that Liberal member of Parliament who said, we have to be real careful about whose name gets out there. I mean, once these dominoes start to fall, it's going to pick up speed. And eventually, just like all the president's men, it's going to get to the top, because we know who benefited, right? Key bono, or whatever it is they say, who benefited. I mean, ultimately, it was Justin Trudeau. It was the guy who ended up winning 3 straight elections. And now more and more Canadians are wondering whether or not those victories, I mean, maybe not 2015 so much, but certainly 2019 and 2021 may have been due to Chinese meddling. So let's talk a little bit more about what some of the work that you've been doing in terms of uncovering and following the breadcrumbs on who was involved and how they were involved. Andy?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of these networks, and so CSIS themselves said that there's an intricate network. So I'm trying to figure out who's in that network, and there's a couple of us who do this, right? But Bob Mackin did point out on this list of donors, and to be frank, the more I dig into this, the less I'm worried about the 2019-2021 election. I'm actually getting a lot more worried about the 2015 election. Looking at this, and I think that any sort of inquiry has to go back that far, and maybe before that, because a lot of
Wow,
these.
that's interesting. So
a lot-
you think 2015 was the election that may have been where the Chinese may have meddled?
Well, I think that there's a lot of indications, right? And that's been put out in MSM. Like I said, I mean, we have these sort of unusual donations that came in from outside ridings, and I'm not the only one who's pointed that out. Bob Mackin did dig into those donors, and he found out that some of the people who hosted Justin Trudeau at these fundraisers, and that were linked to the illegal casinos and fentanyl and money laundering. And these aren't Canadian. These are Canadian citizens, but I mean, they used to be members, like actual members of the People's Liberation Army in China. Like these were actual soldiers. So if these are the sort of people
Wow.
who were drumming up donations, that's highly concerning, right? And if these are the people who are throwing their support behind him, you have to wonder whether, and again, it's not illegal for these people to have made those donations, but I think that we should be scrutinizing whether they were directed by maybe foreign actors,
Yeah,
right?
there's this tweet. They absolutely did want the Liberal Party to win. To your point about 2015, from the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Canada, hosted by Ambassador Liu Zhaohui in 2015, quote, they are of the view that the Liberal Party is traditionally friendly towards China. Yeah, friendly. Here's a Bob Fife tweet. The issue is not that China, according to intelligence sources, wanted the Liberals to win, though the implications are disturbing. Can anyone claim to be surprised? The issue is whether it had help. So there you go. I mean, talk about this tweet here where you've got him basically in bed with the Chinese embassy. And yeah,
So
go ahead.
this is Lou Zavui. So, they put out a press release. They were very, very happy that the Liberals won. They absolutely wanted them to win because they felt like they were softer on China policies. If you go down to the next tweet too, really, really interesting. It looks like Lou Zahui, if you just scroll down, Mark, it looks like Lou Zahui was close to and met with Zhang Bin. Now, of course, Deng Bin was a Chinese businessman linked to the Communist Party, very strong ties there, who got together with New Genshing and donated that $1 million to the Trudeau Foundation. And of course, that money has since been returned by the Trudeau Foundation as, sort of tainted cash. One of the leaked documents that came out that Sam Cooper put out said that donation, that $1 million donation, was actually directed by people within the People's Republic of China. So, I question whether maybe this was the channel that it went through. Because you do have this, this ambassador who was gunning for Trudeau, meeting with Zhang Bin. And then afterwards, he met with New Genshing after this donation was given up. So he was very much connected to these two people who donated that money to the Trudeau Foundation. Very, very close. Obviously there's ties there. So I wonder if maybe this was sort of one of the conduits that foreign influence was exerted upon the Liberal Party and how they tried to sort of throw their weight around and buy them off, so to speak.
Yeah. Andy Lee joining us on the Mark Petronas show right here in Saga 960. And the beat goes on here. Here's Justin Trudeau with Rongjiang Tiger Yuan in 2016. As you pointed out, that's cozy. Why is this individual important?
So this was one of the guys, Bob Mackin, zeroed
Yeah,
it.
this is Cooper's story as well.
Yeah.
Sam Cooper says in 2015, the year before the real estate investor and RCMP target Tiger Yuan sent money to Trudeau's riding association, the former member of the China's People's Liberation Army made cash buy-ins totaling $4.19 million at River Rock in Richmond, according to BC Gaming. So these people are They got deep pockets. I'm
They're
going
the
to
mafia.
go
This is
ahead.
the Chinese mafia. This is the Chinese mafia, Mark. This is what it is. And so these are the people. So this was somebody who was also on that list that I put out that donated to Justin Trudeau. Bob Mackin picked it up. This was the guy who was actually in the People's Liberation Army. So he was an actual legit Chinese soldier. He has a massive mansion in BC that was apparently funded by the Chinese military, linked to these some of these shady casino deals that came under scrutiny with Cooper's reporting for money laundering, and also linked to drug gangs, fentanyl, things like that. So highly suspicious character. And again, these were the people that were hosting Justin Trudeau, that were donating to Justin Trudeau, them and their colleagues. And so again, you have to wonder, if all of these donations that came outside of BC were sort of part of this, this very unsavory network of, people who have been linked to very, very serious criminal activity. These aren't minor violations. These are, major violations. These are really, really concerning ties that they have, and still very, very close. Again, it's not just like these people are, really just Canadian citizens, right? Very, very close to, the Chinese military and things like that. So, this is who it seems like was funneling money to Justin Trudeau's campaign. I mean, basically, it looks like our prime minister got funded by the Chinese mafia. I mean, we've got arms dealers, we've got drug dealers, we've got money launderers. I found another one today on that list. They were accused of defrauding Chinese Canadian citizens of $200,000. One of them in an immigration scheme, these crazy immigration schemes where, you pay a lot of money, we'll, invest in our business, things like that. We've got our, we've got our paws in citizen and immigration in Canada. We'll get you in the door. So another one of those people on that donor list was somebody who was sued for defrauding a Chinese Canadian citizen out of a lot of money in one of these immigration schemes.
And
So
these are the people that Trudeau has been getting money from or getting support from.
His base. This is his core voter base, right? I
The
mean,
mafia.
I've got questions. I've got
I guess.
questions.
I mean, this guy has been rubbing shoulders with some of the seamiest characters, whether they're associated with the Chi-Coms or whether they're just criminals. It's amazing. And presumably people back home, highly placed individuals with the Chi-Com party, are getting kickbacks from some of this money. I mean, it just stinks to high heaven, doesn't it? And by the way, we got to talk about what happened in Markham, Unionville, where in 2021, the election there, there was voter suppression done potentially by the Chinese. Well-connected people in the party were helping the Liberals, helping Justin Trudeau. And guess what happened? 7,000 fewer Conservatives voted for the then incumbent, a guy by the name of Soroyo. And this guy had not been as friendly to the Beijing government as others would have. And so, sure enough, there was this full court press by the Chinese. Who knows? Quite possibly with the cooperation, with the tacit knowledge of people connected with Justin Trudeau, if not he himself. And sure enough, many of these people were threatened, told, yeah, by the way, how's your family doing back in China? We know who they are. We know where you are. And you might want to stay home on election day, or you might not want to bother casting a ballot. Let's listen here to the Toronto Association for Democracy, a guy by the name of Chuk Kwan. And you tweeted this out, delivering a heartbreaking and chilling testimony in committee about how he has been threatened on Canadian soil by the Beijing regime. You get a phone call asking, so how are your parents doing back in Sichuan, China? Are they doing all right? Because, depending on how you vote, they might not be doing all right. Let's listen.
You get a phone call, not only just in the middle of the night, but you get a phone call in the middle of the day asking, so how are your parents doing back in Sichuan, China? And then you'll get the message. That means if you don't behave, your parents' phone numbers, address, or even their physical well-being is under threat. So in that sense, it's a very subtle threat, and they've used this on many, many Chinese Canadians. I'm sure they have done this to Mr. Totti as well. So this is something that I can vouch for. I will tell you a very innocuous kind of way that they did to me. I was traveling to Hong Kong for a cultural event. I'm a filmmaker. I went to a film festival in Hong Kong to present my film, and I was followed in Hong Kong back in 2005. And I was questioned during the Q&A period by what I seemed to be an agent of the Chinese communist regime. And these are little things that they know. You know that I know that you know that I'm watching you.
Right. It's an intimidation technique. And so if you use that technique on enough people, you suppress the vote of conservatives, people who would otherwise have voted for Soroyo in that riding, Markham Unionville. And the results of that may have been very different. And my discussions with people like Georgianne Burke suggest that Soroyo knew that there was something wrong at the door. He would be knocking on doors, and people that had supported him in the past say, oh, well, we support you this time, but they weren't as enthusiastic about it that time. And he got the sense that a lot of these people have been approached, maybe got a interesting or even threatening phone call. And so this is the meddling that China is involved in. I mean, he paints a real picture there, doesn't he, Andy, about how the Chinese election meddling machine works.
Yeah, I mean that really broke my heart to hear that. And I mean, you know that this stuff goes on, you hear it, but you don't usually hear about it in Canada, but we are hearing about it more and more in Canada. Like I said, we heard from Eileen Calvary, and that was another really heart-wrenching testimony. That she put forward, saying that this is the first time that she's been afraid in her country, in her own country. So, and this is, it's the intimidation tactics. And a lot of this sort of movement, we talked about this a little bit on the last show, is run through, a lot of these regime apologists and things like that are connected to hometown associations and cultural associations. And, that's how they sort of, they network and they mobilize and things like that. You see them doing pro-Beijing protests, things like that. Speaking out against Hong Kong independence, Taiwan independence, talking about national security law and speaking up for it. Uyghur deniers, genocide deniers. You heard in Chuck's testimony there about Tody was beside him, right? He's part of the Uyghur Project, does a lot of work with Uyghur advocacy and things like that. So he's been subjected to a lot of the same stuff. So, we really have to, I think we're at a critical time in our country where things are genuinely becoming unsafe, and we've allowed this to go on unchecked for so long, and they operate right out in the open, right? Like, it's not even really secretive. Everybody says, there's a secretive network it's not really that secretive if you know where to look. It's the same actors, the same players talking to the same MPs through the same associations and things like that. I mean, we just saw, this Centre de Sino Quebec, right? So this is under investigation by the RCMP as one of the Chinese police stations. Well, I mean, it's all the same liberal MPs went there. Vincent Kay, was in contact with them.
Yeah.
And, this is an organization that has been accused of intimidating Chinese Canadians in Quebec. And, liberal members have plugged this. Marco Mendocino's plugged it, right? Mary Ng has plugged it. There's a whole bunch of them that have been there plugging it. It's actually received millions and millions and millions. Noah Chartier of the Epoch Times found out it's received millions and millions and millions of dollars in government funding. And not only that, is they were putting out WeChat messages specifically telling people who they had to vote for in the municipal election. And I'm willing to bet they didn't just do it municipally. So, I mean, this is really dark stuff. So this is taxpayers funding one of these third-party voting alliances that are intimidating Chinese Canadians or being accused of intimidating Chinese Canadians, linked to a lot of our high-level politicians. And the woman who runs that, Zizi Li, she's at events with a whole bunch of high-level PRC consulate officials and things like that. So she's in really, really tight with these people. This isn't a passing relationship. It's not like, they go to events together. and put out statements together and things like that. So very, very tight knit relationship. And then we've got taxpayers funding it. And then they're turning around and putting out secret messages on WeChat telling our Chinese Canadians who to vote for in the municipal election. Right? I mean, what's going on here? This is pretty serious stuff. And
Yeah,
it's
it
not
is.
just
And
one center. I'll tell you that right now, right? Han Dong did the same thing, and I pointed that out. There's a voting alliance in BC.
uh-huh.
It's linked to an address in China. There's a clubhouse. And Han Dong actually went there and gave these people an award from the federal government, which really means the Liberal government, for their success in engaging people in politics. I mean, this is just, this is just a third party voting machine that's out there. And if you look at their website, they tell you to vote for Liberals. Go out, donate the max amount to the Liberal Party, right? This is what their messages put out. And this is the Wensu Friendship Society that is also under RCMP investigation right now. So, I mean, this is a network. Its tentacles are everywhere. It's in every level of politics. It's reaching really deep. And like I said, I think 2019 doesn't cut it. I think we have to go back further,
Yeah.
a lot further.
Sure sounds like it. I mean, they were in this guy's up his butt back in 2013. I mean, a lot of the money that was starting to be funneled in, they knew this guy straight off the bat. They saw him that this is a guy that we can control. And here is Trudeau saying, we're working to appoint that special, I call it a raconteur, that special independent expert. This is his idea of having an inquiry that really isn't an independent inquiry. This is his handpicked person. This is behind closed doors. We're working extremely quickly on that, says Prime Minister Trudeau. Let's listen.
Prime Minister, can you give us an update on when a decision will be made regarding the rapporteur?
We know how important it is for Canadians to have confidence in our system and to have the right independent expert.
Notice he stressed the word independent. That's because he picked the guy who did oversee the convoy, who was longtime Liberal. I want to say a guy who was right in the party, worked with his own man. This guy, all he does is appoint Liberal toadies.
Reassuring of that, because it's not about what one political party says or another. It's about making sure that experts are stepping up to reinforce the integrity of our democratic processes. We are working to appoint that special rapporteur, that special independent expert in the coming days or week. We're working extremely quickly on that.
We need a criminal investigation, Andy. I hope we get one day.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's time. I think, even though the RCMP said that they're not actively investigating it, I think that they might end up actively investigating it by accident, because like I said, they're already investigating these stations and things like that. And a lot of these stations are connected to the politicians. So I'm not sure how they're going to tiptoe around that and not investigate election interference. Even if they didn't intend to, they're going to be sort of cornered into it, because that's part of it. I love Terry Glavin. He made a comment about that clip about Trudeau. He's like, it's always the same, buzzwords, and then a squinty look and a smile at the end after he says nothing at all. So yeah, that's exactly what he's known for doing. It's what he's going to keep on doing. I think, he's just going to try to push us off, get it out of the news cycle. And it's really unfortunate and people are noticing this, because it is a massive story and there's more to it, right? Like, we're just skimming it. Like, we're just on the top, right? We're not, like, this is what we know and this is what we don't know down here, right? And there's the water level. But it is already dropping out of the news cycle, and that's really, really concerning. But I think that that's what he's counting on by pulling this stunt, and by not doing a public inquiry. He's going to delay appointing this rapporteur, or whatever it is, and hope that this sort of, dies down and drops out of the news cycle and takes a little bit of the heat off. I think he's hoping that, this is just going to go the way of the other scandals and be forgotten about. But I do think that this is really serious. This is probably one of the most serious scandals that he's ever faced.
Yeah. Meantime, he's trying to buy time so that the cops can hunt down this whistleblower. What we really need is another huge blockbuster, another big story. I don't care who it goes to, Cooper or Fife and Chase or anybody who's going to do it. We need or you for that matter. I mean, we need another big story that brings this right to the forefront and puts this, puts the heat right back on this guy. What do you think?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think Cooper is maybe slow playing this government a little bit, and that's exactly what I'd be doing if I were him. He has been sued on several occasions for his reporting. Joyce Murray, a Liberal MP, her WeChat account, I pointed out, was actually used to promote a lawsuit against Sam Cooper. They were asking for donations to sue him. So if I was Sam Cooper, I would definitely be, just letting this drip out. I'm willing to bet that there's a lot more documents out there. If I was a ceaseless whistleblower or whoever it is, like I said, it's not necessarily from CSIS, because we don't know who had these documents. We know that people in the PMO had these documents. So there's a good chance as well that this isn't just a CSIS leak, it's a PMO leak. So we don't know who that person is. But I mean, if I was that person, I wouldn't see any incentive to stop now. I said, it would be very, very simple to clear this up. If the government actually wanted to clear this up, all they have to do is say that this whistleblower has amnesty from prosecution under national security laws.
Yeah, what an excellent idea.
But
I mean,
they
this is what Poilievre should be saying, right? Or has he already said that?
They should be doing that. And that would be an excellent way to get all of this information forward. And so that we can understand how and why this leak happened. Because it is, I mean, we're all happy that the leak happened, but it is a very serious thing that's transpired here, is we do have a very, high level intelligence leak. So that is concerning.
Yeah, well, the reason why that's how desperate this whistleblower was, or multiple whistleblowers, to get the information out there.
It was done
Because
out of desperation.
they were willing to put their own career on the line, their own freedom on the line, and the fact that they would risk prosecution here in order to get information out that they felt was so incriminating, that said so much about whether or not our prime minister himself might be meddling with the Chinese. It's the collusion, right? This is what's at the core of this thing. Did Prime Minister Trudeau collude with the Chinese in order to meddle in elections, knowing full well that a foreign power that he worked with, collaborated with, was involved in subverting the will of Canadian voters? Last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he specifically colluded with them, but I will say that I think that him and probably a lot of people in his inner circle turned a blind eye. Like I said, these aren't your normal everyday Canadian citizens that he was hanging out with, getting donations from, and doing fundraisers with. These are people who are have deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party, and also, some very, very serious things, offenses like money laundering, drug trafficking, drug running, right? Illegal real estate, things like that. So, I find it hard to believe that his inner circle wasn't aware of that at the time. I just am not buying it, because, you do vet people when you meet them. Even when I was running my election campaign, and my election campaign was nothing to write home about, if somebody asked me if they could help and go out, we did do like a small vetting process, right?
Sure. A Google
Because
search.
you don't want it being linked to somebody
Yeah.
that
You don't
was
want to
something terrible
have
in the
somebody
past,
linked to
right?
the
So
Azov
I don't know if
battalion
he
in
was
Ukraine.
directly colluding, but then again, if you're just sort of turning a blind eye to activities that you knew were probably going on in the background, is
Yeah.
that complicity?
Yeah. All right.
Right. So anyways, yeah, looking forward. Like I said, I hope that leaker keeps on dribbling out that
Keep
information.
on doing what he's the
So
patriot.
the Liberal
I mean,
Party is, watching
I mean
news every
that
day.
guy or
Validation.
person, he or she may be single-handedly attempting a rescue of the country. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Andy. Appreciate
The country needs rescuing, that's for sure. It's
it. Absolutely. You're doing your part. So thank you. We'll see you. Andy Lee. All right, my friends. Let's take a break. Back with more News Talk Saga 960 and the Mark Petrona Show after